Hello. Thank you for reading the article Get Right with God. And I want to explain a little bit more about this, kind of fill in some of the detail. For instance, uh, I start out with a philosopher paragraph there that talks about the perspective from Seneca the Younger that took place back in the years of 4 BC to 65 AD. And one of the things that he said was, "You prove your words by your deeds." And, that's not unlike some of the things that we read in the Bible. And here is a purely unbiblical philosopher who's citing very much the same meaning. He goes on to say that deeds and words should be in accord, that a man should be equal to himself under all conditions and always the same. And so, even as we read into our scripture, we're correlating different verses that tell us about being consistent in our thought life. And, even from a philosophical point of view, this makes sense far and beyond just a biblical perspective. However, we need to move on into a biblical perspective at this time. And so, I talk about this a little bit in the next paragraph under faith, where I'm trying to correlate the way that we are trying and striving to live compared to the philosophical view when we have a biblical perspective that gives us a refinement of that thought. And so James tells us in 2:26 that faith apart from works is dead. And he's very, very accurate about this. It's one thing to profess a theological perspective, but it's another thing to walk the talk. And that's something that many people are struggling with. I go on in the article to talk about a gentleman named Tim. I changed the name for the purpose of the story, but the individual, the character, is indeed a real one. And he made a comment once in a public setting. He said that he tries to protect his circle. He had this group, this clique, if you will, of regular people that he would attend and make time for and time with. And so he felt it necessary to protect his circle. They were sort of his people. And he wouldn't let others join in his clique, because if they didn't possess his view of a religious perspective and his view of what is a good and wholesome person, then they cannot receive the benefit of his friendship, really. And it's so sad. Somehow Tim has allowed the world to degrade his Christianity. And he's basically opened the door for Satan to have his way with his thought life, with Tim's thought life, closing opportunity to serve others. And it's so shameful. There's so many people that Tim could benefit from, but there's so much that Tim can offer others. And to close the doors to those potential interactions is a terrible thing. And we got to be careful where we cross the line on, how we judge our religious perspective, how we judge others, and how we align ourselves with others. James tells us that religion that is pure and undefiled before God is one where we exemplify the helping of others. He specifies orphans and widows and their affliction, and as an example, and he also talks about keeping oneself unstained from the world. And it's so important to maintain that cleanliness of mind and to prevent delusion from coming in and affecting our thought life. Paul mentions in Ephesians a really good point, and I'm going to change for the purpose of this discussion one of the words Paul says. He starts out with saying, "Let the thief no longer steal." but rather let him labor at doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with everyone in need, or anyone in need. You know, if we took the word thief out and put man in there and went straight to the point of the scripture, you know, to let any individual excel and turn himself around, whether it be a thief or whether it be somebody just struggling, so that he may have something to share with anyone in need, I think is the essence of what Paul's talking about. And it's something that we can actually churn to not mean something else, but to expand and to realize its application in other situations. So, you know, it's a shame when you see folks like Tim who have so much to share with others, and he limits himself to a select few. And basically, in doing so, he turns his heart to stone. He's only interested in focusing on those that fit, and that fit in, as it pertains to Tim's template of what is an ideal person, realizing that, you know, the next person who he turns away could actually be one that becomes the fit as well, if given an opportunity to receive the gifts that Tim has. And Tim's got some great gifts, you know, just in his character alone, to talk to him and to be inspired by him and motivated by him. That's really the simplest thing. It costs nothing to do, and yet, you know, basically we're talking about investing time in someone else. It's not even a material cost, you know, and yet, you know, to turn away all kinds of interaction is such a shame. I think perhaps that sometimes what happens is an individual who achieves, like Tim, a certain status, a social status in life because of his material success, or acquire a distorted view, and as he looks around and sees his success, his material success, he forgets by whose word those material gifts were allowed. You know, they weren't given to Tim by Tim's own means. They were given to Tim by the blessings of God through the talents that God provided Tim, and so Tim used wisely. And I think as material success begins to encroach in one's life, we begin to have this challenge that is discussed in Matthew 6:24. And that challenge is that you cannot serve God in money. And so in attempting to do that, we often fail. What usually happens is an individual begins to become prideful, begins to have misguided ideas, such as what I was explaining with Tim, and then there's some sort of damage that follows. You know, one solution is taking a look at Proverbs 18:2, which says, "A fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only expressing his opinion." You know, but with repetitious compassion, I believe it's possible to turn somebody like Tim around through the example of a better mindset. And so, you know, in Psalms 119, 130, we talk about the unfolding of our words, giving light and imparting understanding. And I think that's a key thing that has to be done, especially in Tim's case. The bottom line is this: philosophy alone will not get you right with God, and neither will trying to read into the Bible your own view of purpose that God has provided for you. I hope you've enjoyed the article, and I thank you for your questions every week. I appreciate you watching this video, and I hope you have a blessed day.